with you if somebody takes care of every single present moment. There's nothing to fear. Who has done that? Who doesn't have some?
I mean, you gotta work towards it. Always a goal to work towards.
Okay.
Man, what was it? The question you were asking?
I don't know much. Look, if I was in Cal, obviously I'm here promoting Christianity, okay? The Easter holiday, obviously. If you were Muslims, I think I know what I would say. But I don't know much about your faith, so I don't necessarily know how to respond.
Let's start with the basics then, right? The main three principles of the religion: working hard and honestly, sharing what you have with others, whether that be giving back time, money, whatever you can afford. Minimum 10%, that's like the standard. And then the last one is just remembering God, thanking God for what you have. So that's basically what the religion boils down to. And, it's the main path is hukum, which basically means God's will. And so if you follow hukum, it's kind of like going with the flow. It's like a river flowing. You have a choice. You can either fight the river or the current, you can fight the current and go backwards, or you can just flow with it. You tell me which one's going to be a lot easier.
Going with the flow, of course.
Right. And so that doesn't mean that, rocks are not going to come in the way. Rocks are going to be there, but because you're flowing with the rest of the river, you're going to be all right.
You, in that analogy, you compare flowing with the flow with following God's will?
Yes.
See, that's completely the opposite of what I seem to see happening in the world. Most people go with the flow. They just go with what society is telling them is the easiest thing to do, which usually in the short term is easy. Their short-term life is going to be easy, but I will admit, often that results in problems later on. But not always. There are some people who live wicked lives, and they don't seem to pay for it in this world.
So, look, I mean, the thing is that Sikhi also believes in the saint soldier lifestyle, where people like Hitler, or for right now what's going on in the current state of Punjab, the Sikh homeland, Sikhs are being oppressed a lot. Just because that's the way that the river is flowing, that does not mean that it's okay, right?
I think there's two separate rivers, though. You're talking about more of like a worldly river in that sense, and I think he's talking more about like a spiritual river. So it's like when you're following God's will and like you're actually doing the things you're supposed to be doing, then you're flowing with the current. But if you're contradicting the current, then you're following like the worldly river, which is like then you're going, which is what you were saying.
So the worldly river is society in that aspect. Every single person you meet in society, every single person, including us at times, right, is trapped in one of the five vices.
Anger,
lust, greed, attachment, or ego. Every single person, right? There's not, so what society tends to push you towards is those five vices. Either lust, either ego, you gotta have the biggest cars, you gotta have the biggest properties.
consumerism,
right?
Capitalism, all of it.
And look, you need that to survive. You need money to survive. And so that's where the saint soldier lifestyle comes into play, where you're as peaceful as a saint, and you're living in the world, but you're detached from it, right? So that's kind of where it comes from, going with the flow. Just understanding that everything that happens is God's will.
In a sense, everything that happens is certainly His will. Although I would not go so far as to say with some I wouldn't advocate for fatalism. God wants that rape to happen. He wants this murder to happen. So more so that He would let it work out for His good.
There's also a different understanding, right? Christianity, correct me if I'm wrong, believes that God is a separate entity.
Yes, certainly. We are not Him.
So what Sikhi teaches is the truth, right? We don't say that Sikhi is a blend of two religions. We say that this is what the truth is. Other religions may view it the way they want to view it, right? The way that Sikhi teaches is that God is separate from the world, but God is also within the world. So everything we see, everything you see is God.
Is God or has
This
God?
is God's creation.
You have God inside you. I have God inside of me. He has God inside of me.
But this is
God's creation too.
And God's creation is an expansion of God.
So it's like an analogy like
We
this.
might be agreeing on it without knowing it. I'm not sure.
So
If you have an ocean, right?
Yeah.
You have an ocean. Let's say that's God as the analogy. If you take a cup, you take part of the ocean. You name, what's your name?
Jonathan.
You name it Jonathan. Take another cup. My name's Akon. Take part of the ocean. Name it Akon. Take another cup. Name it Deshmesh. Now take 8.4, however many people there are, however many like species there are, all of it. Take cups and name it that. But those are us individuals that are part of God. Now we pour it back in the ocean. What's the ocean? It's God. So essentially, we're separated from God because we have our own ego that's separating us. But essentially, when we pour it back in, who are we absorbed in? We're absorbed in God.
And you asked what's the point of the Sikh religion, right? It's essentially breaking down that barrier between you and what you perceive to be as God, where God is something separate and I'm something separate. Once you realize that there's no difference between me and the one, God is not some character that's sitting up in heavens or, somebody who's gonna sit there and take justice. God is right now. God is here right now, right? And so that's why we say that justice, we don't wait for justice. That's again the Saint soldier lifestyle. If there's something wrong happening, we stop it right now. And that's again going with the flow of God. Where me being here, watching something wrong happen in front of me, and me being that person that will stop that happening is
We should stop evil. If this analogy of us simply, and maybe that's not the whole analogy, if this analogy of us just being components of God holds true, why is it that God as a whole is perfect and holy, but we as individuals are evil? You would think every cup of water has the same components as the entire ocean.
Have you ever played Mario Kart?
No, I don't.
Okay. Do you know at least parts of the game? Like if basically it's like a race to get to the finish line, right? And throughout the game, you'll have banana peels thrown your way. You'll have other things come in your way, and you'll kind of slip and slide and fall off the path to get to the finish line. Our life is exactly like that game. So God is the one who created this game as well and created this life. So we literally believe life is also a game that we are playing, and the goal is to reach God. So the things, the banana peels and the things that are thrown in our way, those are the 5 vices. Those are the things that are created to distract us from the end goal.
Why in the world would God do that?
God has fun.
It's God's game.
But you saying
So let me go back to the analogy. If you take the cup of ocean, right? You might have some sand in there, no?
You might.
If you go all the way down.
Ocean,
exactly. We're not pure ocean. That's the thing.
Okay.
We have our minds. God doesn't have his mind. We have minds. What's in those minds? The 5 vices we talked about. And those 5 vices are here to distract us.
Yeah. So, but there's also, once you realize that everything is God's will, you realize that even these 5 vices are God's will.
Exactly.
And that's
why fight for justice at all?
You need them to survive. Because they are considered bad, but at the same time, there's a flip side. Think of it like a coin. For example, you could have anger, which is the worst side of aggression. But on the other side of the coin, you also have ferocity. And
You use it for good. You use it for justice.
Yeah.
So
Well, I recognize anger is not always bad, but if you're going to recognize a situation where the anger would be unjustified, is
So
that situation
that's
just as
the
good
wrong
as any other
anger.
time?
But that's the wrong type of anger.
It's in
So
God's will, but that doesn't mean that it's okay in that sense. That makes sense.
Like when he says we need these stuff to survive, this talk is individualistic. If our whole society had this mindset, then we wouldn't need these things to survive, because we wouldn't need to be able to do certain stuff to survive. But since we live in a society where the norm is certain stuff, obviously this mindset is very individualistic, and it's seen in our religion, but it's not seen throughout the whole world. That's why we need certain we need lust to survive. We need lust to reproduce, right? It's not like we can.
too much of lust creates the negative part of it.
Exactly.
I had always thought
Ego, there's 2 flip sides to it. There's ego and there's pride. You need pride to hold yourself, to stand your ground, but the second you have ego, you're going to ruin all your accomplishments.
Is
You're
that the same thing, though? Because I always thought of
2 separate things.
pride of simply just dignity that God grants you. whereas
Exactly.
So-
ego is something putting yourselves above other people, which is not really the same.
Well, that's exactly, so it's 2 separate things. So you need, the ego is what's bad, but you need the pride to
I would say a
survive.
different word, maybe confidence.
Okay,
But essentially,
Yeah.
there's 2 sides. It's the heads part and the tails part. They're the same thing essentially, but it's just two opposite ends of the spectrum.
I think I'm picking up what you're laying down. Do you then, as some Hindus might say, deny the concept of sin as a crime, like a cosmic crime that needs to be judged?
So, again, it goes back to the justice where sin exists, but sin is there. So look, there's 2 different ways, right? If you see sin happening right there, let's say I see somebody beating up somebody else right now, right? Definitely that's wrong. I would go and stop it. So that's outwardly. But if you look at sin from the inside, right? Me having bad thoughts. Once you realize that everything is part of God's will, it becomes so much easier to just mold your thoughts.
similar to the Hinduism
Right?
thing where you need to
Once
also
you
get
realize that
justice
I
for
have a
it.
choice whether I want to be angry
How that
or
compares to
not,
Sikhi.
it becomes so much easier to stop it. right? That's what it comes down to.
What if someone wants to be angry? What if they enjoy
God's
being
will.
angry and lustful and coveting and so
God's will.
That's part of the game, and you have to
There
you
would
have
be no
to
reason to seek for justice at all.
you have to
But
break
look,
out the
if we're
mindset.
attacking somebody else, that's a problem. We need to stop.
It's
Right?
God's will.
It is God's
I
will.
mean,
but
why?
It is
Why
God's
do
will.
it?
It's a rock thrown in the river. It's a rock in the river. You're supposed to guide or work around it, right? And you working around it in that situation would be protecting the person that's getting assaulted or hurt, right? So you're still following the flow of the river, but there's something in the way, right? An obstacle God put. Your job is to work around it, because if you keep on bumping into it, you're not following the flow, right? You're supposed to work around that object in the river.
Like the banana peels thrown in the way.
Yeah.
You
Like,
need
you're supposed to
to.
work around it, avoid it. Not avoid it, but like,
Just a small sheet of copy print paper.
I can get with
You know,
the
I tried to
idea
divide it- I
of
tried to
God
divide
arranging
a copy of
our
paper
lives
in
so that we had challenges we needed to overcome. But the concept of God being the author of sin or of evil, creating it, seems like an insult.
But
to
I
his
have a
character.
question for you then.
Yes.
Is God the most powerful being, like in
He is.
Christianity?
He is.
Then who is Satan?
Satan is a fallen angel who, because of his free will, like we all, can choose what is he would choose to
So-
value himself over others.
If God is as powerful as you're saying he is, why can't God just get Satan into control and take care of everything that
He
needs to be?
certainly could. There is a reason. There is a reason for God allowing some evil to go its own way for
Yeah.
which doesn't mean that he's causing evil. Simply that he's permitting it, tolerating it. and
In God's will. God is allowing it.
That's his will.
If that's what you mean by God's will, yes, I get that.
So
But that
it's-
would be different from implying this. So many often would imply that evil itself is his desire. He wants it, but he wants it so that he can achieve a greater thing, the redemption of our sins.
like it's a game, right? So at the end of the day, the point is to meet God. Like that's literally what my name means. It's to merge with God. In the same way he said that you, like when you dump the cup of water back into the ocean, it merges, it becomes one, and it can't be separated again. You're not going to ever be able to separate that same thing again. That's the whole point of the game of life. So whether it's Satan there or whatever, we just believe that God is controlling the whole thing. God is not a he, God is not a she. God is a being because God is beyond us. If we begin to call God a he, that means we're humanizing God, and God is equal to us. God is beyond us.
The
God
way
is
that Gurbani
above
describes-
us.
The Sikh teachings describe God, right? Because it becomes confusing. It's like it's not a he, it's not a she, but it's within us, but it's separate. There's really only one way that Gurbani, the Sikh teachings describe God. It says ik.
It's
Ik. That means
Ik.
one.
Okay.
That's how you say the number one. That means it's everything. It's everywhere. It's every time. It's been present from the beginning, from before the beginning. It's present now. It's going to be present in the future. It's going to be present at the end of this creation. By the way, this creation has happened multiple times. So again, it just goes back to the name. It says Kai Bar Basrio Basara. Multiple times this creation has been created and destroyed. But Sada Sada Ik Gangara. But before and after and throughout is just the one. That one is always there. That one is always going to be present. So
And still he is right now happy such right now too.
Okay.
yeah.
I can understand, in my worldview, why God would allow evil, because free will is important. And to have real
Just a
love,
question,
you gotta have free will.
what's considered evil in your eyes?
Well, you could just generalize it and say it's anything that's against God's will. But
Going against
that
God's
you got to be very careful how to parse that, because what He allows is, in one sense, His will, but what He wants individuals to do.
So
is
I have a
completely-
question though.
completely different thing.
Is God's will written in the Bible?
Much of it is, yes.
Okay, and how would you like address the fact that a lot of the Bible has kind of been outdated when it comes to like the treatment of women, or
I think it's outdated.
you don't?
No, I think our impression of that is either a misinterpretation of what it says, or a misunderstanding of why certain things were put in place at the time that they were. To say,
If I may interject, so
Yeah.
one thing I do know about the history of the Bible, well, I'll ask you as well. Who was it written by?
physically written by men,
Written by?
human beings.
Okay, how long after the message was given?
Depends on which part. Book of Genesis, written down by, we believe, Moses around 1500 BC. So
A
that
lot of it
means-
was also written after Moses gave his message and after the
Yes,
prophets
yes.
gave their message. Have you ever played the game of telephone?
I have. Not comparable.
I think it very much so is, because even Guru Granth Sahib Ji, the Sikh teachings, there's a very stark difference between the Bible and any other religion and the Sikh teachings, because the Sikh teachings were written by the prophets themselves. And the game of telephone, which you played, I know you're saying it's not comparable, but I think if you do read it, Sikhi believes in equality for every race, religion, creed, caste, gender, regardless of who you are, what you look like, where you come from. And I think that's something that's contradicted in the Bible. And I truly think that maybe that's something you may have to research again. But in today's language and in today's world, I do believe that there is a stark representation of inequalities that are given according to the genders in Christianity in the Bible. So I'm just saying, like, of the telephone.
Probably
The game of telephone, I think, plays a big difference in this too, because I do believe that, you know, these prophets, they had good intentions, and I'm not sure that they would ever believe that, what was written. So I think it's just the message gets diluted. So I think it's important for you to also look into that as well. See Nicola, you guys?
the reason I say it's not comparable is that the Bible was not given like this. Here's what God said. It wasn't. Most of the prophets are like this. Hey, this is what God says, everybody. It was very public, very public.
If you look at the 12 followers at the, you know what I'm talking about.
The disciples of Christ, yeah.
Right. The Sikh teachings are the only teachings in the world that were recorded by the prophets themselves. It was prescribed. It said, remind me again. It said, what's the line? I'm blanking.
Oh, Guru Nanak Dev Ji the one.
Yes.
Turki Bani aayi thi sab.
Turki Bani aayi, then sagali jint mitai. This is one of the prophets, the gurus speaking. He says,
He's God himself, quite literally.
Guru
Are we
Bani.
all God? How is he different?
He is a form of God that has eliminated his mind. He's pure.
It's one. It's one.
So he's not fighting the five
eliminated his
vices.
vices.
Yes.
Yeah. He is.
So he's become one with God.
One with the one.
Yeah, one with one.
So that line, it says Turki Bani aayi, then sagali jint mitai. It says the word from God, the one, is being revealed to me right now. Then sagali jint mitai. This word will relieve all tension, all stress. This word, as it's coming, as it's being spoken, it relieves all stress. So what did they do? They wrote it down right in front.
Even more so, this same guru, who we consider like a form of God, this whole "Apo bol na janda." How means I. Apo bol na janda. I don't say this stuff. Main kaya sab hukmao jiyo. It's coming straight from God. I'm not saying any of this. It's coming straight from God. Guru Gobind Singh Ji, the 10th Guru, says, "Jonis brahmo so kaha so kahyo jag mai." I'm not saying any of this. It's for the whole world. God is saying this through me to the whole world.
And if it's true, we should listen to that.
Yeah.
You want to listen to God. That is, by the way, what Jesus claimed.
Right.
But I understand the Bible was not written physically.
Yeah.
by
So it's
Jesus.
like, how do you know that it's guaranteed? Like, that's exactly what Jesus said if it wasn't written when he was saying it.
Like you would do it to any other historical text, you got to look for whether somebody has a reason to lie about it, and you got to observe the chain of.
I mean,
There was
of
actually studies as well showing that, you know, the Virgin Mary, that also in itself was actually recently changed in the early 1900s. The Latin thing was, she was not actually a virgin in itself. It was just that she was like young, and that was the word that was mistranslated.
The word
so
can mean young woman or virgin, but I mean,
it's two
even
separate.
in-
My
even in
point is that
English,
it's
only
two
a-
separate things, though, and now like it's become this holy pious thing where like a virgin woman, especially in Christianity, is like, you know, like it's a big thing to have, and that's not what, you know, how Jesus was born anyway. Like Mary was not a virgin, and I'm sure if you read the Latin text of that, you'll see that. But
I
and there's
challenge
also
that. I don't
there's
know
also
if I wanna
studies
engage it
proving
now,
that,
I
but
challenge you, you know.
there's studies
you
proving
know
that.
it very, just as well. There's plenty of detractors of all kinds of religion that put out lies as well. I'm not going to just dismiss what you said.
My point is, like, look, things get changed over time, and like mistranslations as well, which are very important to consider when looking at things that are specifically in the Bible, because they're not exactly written by the prophets themselves.
So could it be possible that what the prophet said, whoever wrote down the Bible, I'm not too informed about Christianity, they misinterpreted it.
Misinterpreting
What
God
the
was
prophet
saying.
said, the writers of the Bible.
I mean, if we would accept that, we'd have to jettison the Bible altogether, because that's the central claim. Not that the copies are perfect, although I do believe generally they are,
Right.
but that when the inspired man first wrote down what God's message, that it was perfect. So I do believe that, yes. Now, Christian message would not be completely wrong, even if that had happened,
Right,
as
right,
you say,
right.
but
Yeah.
I mean, when you consider the miracles these men performed and the lives that they lived, it's pretty reasonable to think that they just didn't get it and God didn't stop them from
Absolutely.
at the moment, you know.
But in our religion, miracles in general, like if you see a miracle, you're gonna be like, wow, right? It's funny because God says that the biggest miracle is this whole world, right? I can't think
Out
of
of
a
nothing.
Yeah.
Out of nothing.
But
Now, do you think that God makes the physical world out of nothing, or is it also part of Him?
Well, it's not.
he says he creates himself, Sapang, and then he creates the expansion of the
You
universe.
create yourself.
That's God.
It's God.
Come on, guys.
All right, well then,
I can't challenge you on that. You can't create yourself.
How can we?
but it's God.
It's God. We can't.
It doesn't matter.
We don't.
Nothing
then-
doesn't make something.
God's
How did
God's limits
Christian
are
God
unknown.
come about then?
He doesn't exist.
He
He doesn't exist before he's created.
Exactly. He created himself.
Which is false. For that very reason.
I'd say it's more so that we can't comprehend.
We can't comprehend
Yeah, like,
anything.
we can't-
We're
any
such
of
lowly
God.
beings
Yeah.
that like our minds are contaminated with the vices, and we're so separated from the actual being that we can't even comprehend the vastness
even then,
and the
even the Gurus
amazingness
have
of
said-
God.
Tera ant na paya.
Even
Yeah.
the gurus can't.
Even the prophets
understand,
themselves.
comprehend.
You can't tell me. So
Guys, there are things about God I'm not going to say I know everything.
have you witnessed
but
your
there's gotta
dad's
be some
birth?
kind of. I didn't. I know
How
that
do you know-
I
how
know
do you
that
know
he
that
is
he
here.
exists?
Plus, well, I know he's here, and I know that he is finite. I know that he's going to die at some point.
Okay.
And
God?
He is grown.
No.
His dad.
He's a nice guy, but I wouldn't call him a funny guy.
So that's the thing. If you haven't witnessed his birth, how do you know that it really happened?
I think that most of the things that we know by authority. We know by asking other people and talking to them who were there and trusting them if they seem trustworthy.
It's a fair point. Look, I think it comes down to the same thing where people that have experienced this one, those are the gurus. And they were the ones that wrote these teachings. Again, it came directly from the one, right? It's honestly, I don't think there's much else to say. I would honestly say there's English versions of the Guru Granth Sahib available, and mind you, please note that the English versions do not, or even the Punjabi translations do not give justice to the lines themselves. It's when you understand it, when you read it yourself. Like so there's this one prayer that the Sikhs are supposed to read every day, Japji Sahib. Just taking that as an example, right? We're taught it from a very young age. It's the same thing we repeat every single day, right? But how come now when I'm reading it, I'm 19 years later, it's so much more powerful than it was for me when I was 4.
You've matured. You can understand it now.
Matured. But there's a deeper understanding that goes. So that's what I would say. The translations are just the beginning. But definitely, if you get the opportunity, I would urge. You can
My
go
goal
on
is to
now.
read
Yeah.
as many religious things from all over. I hope to be a promiscuous reader. I'm just often lax and overcome with things. But I do intend.
Really quickly, so just going on the fact that, like you were saying, we should know some stuff about God, right? Like there's no way. That in itself is a vice. That's ego.
Yeah.
That's your ego getting in the way, saying, I know about God. I must know something about God, right?
If we can't know anything for sure, then that statement, that's a vice.
Admitting that we don't know anything is the beginning.
Yeah.
That's only the beginning.
Well, it would be the beginning, but if you just stay there,
If you don't know anything, but how do you know something when you experience it, right?
Yeah.
So
not
people,
necessarily, you might trust somebody else who's experienced it.
But then
It has to be some ground level where we can say yes or no to things to
Before
build everything
you
else on.
experience it, it doesn't become your experience.
No. Does that mean it's not
So
true?
the whole point of Sikhi is to make that experience of the one into your own experience. We have a one-on-one connection. That's why we say you don't need any priest. You don't need any holy person to connect you. You have direct access to the teachings. And
You
if
have
submit
direct
these
access to
teachings-
God.
to the guru.
To the one.
Yeah.
There is
Yeah.
something that stands in the way, in my understanding, though. That what you describe as just these pebbles thrown in the water, I take them far more seriously. They are, because we don't just stumble over them. We often put them in our own place. We often create them for other people. Sin seems to me to be very much like a crime, even if it is just an obstacle. It's not just.
We're not saying it's not a crime. We're just saying like these are things that like I said, it's the banana peels thrown in your way in Mario Kart. These are obstacles you have to come across, whether like you're at that point where you're going to choose whether I want to, like, that guy's saying really bad things to me, he's calling me a terrorist, like, do I want to beat him up or do I want to like take care of that in a different way? Do I want to commit assault or do I want to like deal with that?
There's a line, and again, the same prayer that I mentioned before. Jeta kita teta nao, vin naga na nito nao. It says, whatever is made, and it says it in 2-3 different words in the same line, just to clarify that we're talking about everything here, whether it means this small atoms or the entire creation, right? Universes, galaxies, things we can't even comprehend. Jeta, kita, deta, now, whatever is created is an expanse of your name, of you, right? All I can do is praise it.
Of God's name.
Of God's name, of God, of the one. There's not much else I can do. Tell me, okay, have you ever seen Saturn yourself? Have you ever been there?
Planet?
Yes.
No.
How do you know it exists?
I've seen pictures of it.
Okay.
People who, for whatever reason, I trust, say that it's out there. Yes.
Right. So there's not much else that you could do unless you go and visit it yourself, except to praise it. There's not much else to do.
Even if I were to go there and visit it, I would have to trust my own senses, and I would have to, that would have to be a reasonable conclusion that I come to, as I'm gasping for air.
But anyways, I think we should head back.
Yeah.
It's
We're already late.
yeah.
Oh, you got it.
Yeah,